2007. My name is Hindereisel Stern, born Shinshovich in Bedevla, November 15, 1926. Czechoslovakia, now it's Ukraine. Okay. My father's name was Sruljanka Shimshovich. My mother's name was Henigitl Born Einhorn in Hosselnese, which is Romania. I had a very good childhood. What I remember, we were very happy, and my father was a businessman, and he was considered those years a rich man. And we had a steady maid when we was little. I had a sister, Suri, which I called her Tuya, because I wasn't able to say as a child, I wasn't able to say Suri, so this remained till the end. I called her like this. So till we was little kids, young children, we had a steady maid, a Jewish girl. Her name was Machla. I still remember her very good. Then when we got older, so already my mother just had a woman who came in. This was a gentlewoman who came in every week to clean the house. My father's parents lived also in Bedevla, and it was a very close family. My father had 7 siblings. The name was the oldest was Matl. My father was the second. Then was Yitzchok and Rochel. She was married in Borsche, Romania. Then was Freide. She was married to Ornstein in Tjačevo. And then was a sister. I forget names. Tsipra. She was married to Meyer Maggid, a very religious, he was dying, a very religious man, a very educated man. He lived with my grandfather in the house together. They had also, I don't remember exactly how many children they had about also 6 or 7 children. And the youngest daughter, the youngest sister, my father's, was Ethel. She lived in Felshevishova, which was Romania. She married to a very rich man. They didn't have children. This was the problem. But then, every Friday night, in the winter time, every Friday night we ate at home, supper, and then we went to my grandfather. The whole family came together. My grandmother prepared kegel with beans, those big beans, how you call them, Zocherbundlach. So we were sitting there, and they were benching, and then we went home. This went on very nicely till 1938, till the war broke out. When the war broke out in 1938.
Before we start with the war, you said your father was a businessman. What did he do?
My father was a businessman. He had with fruits, and wholesale with fruits. He was traveling a lot, and we had a lot of property ourselves. We had orchards with apples, plums, cherries, all kind of fruit. And we had a gentle person, a guy who lived on the orchard, watched and took care of this. My mother was a housewife. She didn't do nothing. We had a big house. Considered that time it was a big house. We had 3 rooms and a kitchen and a built-in sukkah. And we had a little garden in back of the house, which we grew our own vegetables, little things, vegetables, because we had big properties also, but with Goyim, we were planting all kind of potatoes and corn and all kind of things. We had for us, and we had also to sell, and we gave a lot of stucco, a lot of poor people away. In 1938...
And also, just you're town, do you know how many people?
In the town lived 120 Jewish families. And in the town was about 1,200 goyim, Ukraine.
How many shuls were in the town?
One shul, one big shul was in the town. My grandfather was Rosh Hakur all the years.
Your father's father.
My father's father. And there was, the Uren Kodesh was in the shul, so on one side, when I was standing across the Uren Kodesh, one side, the side I was sitting, my father's father, and other side, my father was sitting. So upstairs, the women's section, the same thing. My grandmother was on one side, and my mother was on the other side. So the grandfather was Rosh Hakur all the years in Babi.
And your mother's parents?
My mother's parents lived in Hosumez, Romania. My grandfather came from Ganich. He was a very old-fashioned man. I always say that, even I say this always to Zaidi. He was a very old-fashioned man. My grandmother came from a very aristocratic family. And she was, in those days, people didn't go to school, they didn't send children to school, but my mother went to school and she had education, whatever it was in those years. They got married after my father was in World War I, he was captured from the Russians right away after the war started. That time was Austro-Hungarian.
What does that mean?
That means it was the Hungarian, Franz Josef.
Oh, Austro-Hungary.
Austro-Hungary,
Right.
Franz Josef was the
Franz
king.
Joseph.
Yeah. So he was captured from the Russians right beginning of the war. And he was in Kiev for 4 years. But he
4 years?
4 years in Kiev he was captured, but they picked him, he was a butler but a rich man there in Kiev, so he had it good, he didn't have it bad. And soon he came back from Russia already, they was talking already about a shidduch before he came home. My grandmother was very against it because her husband was my grandfather, the Zaide in Hosumeze, he was from Ganich, and I'm telling you, a very old-fashioned man, and they said, Rika, they called it the Rika, because there was a river, Rika, so they called it from the Rika. So my grandmother was very against that shidduch, because she said, I have enough a man for Rika, I don't want a son-in-law from there too. But my mother once, she said, she went, it was the summer, when my father came home already, she went to a cousin. So they had a big farm, a Tonya. They was called a Tonya in some place in Slovakia. And she went there for the summer, just for a vacation. And she met my husband in Tiacho. And I don't know, somehow they must have known each other already. She turned back and she came back and she said, I don't want nobody else, I want through. And this is how the shidduch got. My mother always told us this. I mean, they were very happy and my father was a very nice person and my mother too. Very religious, but not fanatish religious, My father, he was 4 years in Kiev, so he got a little liberal. Like for instance, in those years they didn't let the daughters wear short sleeves or go with short socks. We were allowed to do that. My father allowed us to do that. To talk to a boy also, we were allowed to. So he was very religious. I was brought up in a very strict religious home, but a little modern.
And the whole town it was Hasidim?
The whole time was Hasidim. My father was a stramel and a kaftan, and my mother didn't have a hair on her head, shaved completely, wear a nice sheitel all the time. And this went on like this till 1938.
All right, a few more questions before. Who was the rabbi in the town?
There was no rabbi in our town. My father was a Vishnitzer Chassid. He learned by the Vishnitzer Rebbe by Mendelin. This was the old Vishnitzer Rebbe's son, the oldest son. He learned by him. My father has smicha, had smicha, smicha. And
Where was that? Where did he learn with him?
in the Vishevas.
In where?
The Vishevas.
Where is that?
There's Romania. It's not far, that thing, it's not far one from another place. So, what else I wanted to say? What else you asked me?
Well, I didn't, but I just want to make sure you said your mother's parents' names. I don't know if you said them.
Einhorn. My mother's parents' name was Einhorn.
First and
My
grandfather's name was?
grandfather's name was Velbel Einhorn.
And your grandmother?
And my grandmother's name was Miriam Einhorn, born Goldberg.
And you...
And she came from a very nice family, very nice, she had sisters and brothers, which they were very, different, not fanatish people, very religious, but not fanatish, like my grandfather was.
What is fanatish?
I don't know how to explain it. As if fanatish, very, very old-fashioned.
Okay.
Very old-fashioned.
And you grew up with your...
I grew up
with your father's family in the town. So
I grew up with my father's family in the town, which one brother and two sisters lived.
And so, how often did you see your grandparents from your mother's side?
We went often. When it was Romania, we didn't go to so often. Then it turned also the Hungarians. I'll come to it. When the Hungarians occupied that part of Romania, Transylvania, so we went very often. The train went 5 minutes away.
Right.
We went to the grandparents. I like to go there. It was like a holiday, when I went, because I lived with the other grandparents all the time. I saw them every day. My grandfather used to come every day. He liked very much my mother. He came, my father was the oldest son. And my father was very, learning in Yiddish and nothing and everything, very educated. He didn't go to school. He went to elementary probably, but he didn't have schooling, but he was a very smart man. My grandfather said my father is his eye in the head. He came every day. I see him now walking with a cane. They lived up the hill a little bit, came down to us for an hour or two, sitting and talking to my mother and to the children, to us, to me and my sister, and then back home. My grandmother didn't come so often. She came also, but not so often like my grandmother. Because my father was always away. He was every day, he was someplace else. He was traveling a lot, also abroad. And what else, till 1938. I had a nice childhood, but I didn't have like a teenage years already was horrible. Because I was 12 years old in 1938, right?
Okay, just a few more questions before we get to 1938. Your school, where did you go to school? What kind of school did you have?
Now I went to school. I went to school, to elementary school in Bedevla. I was 5 years. And then I went away to Tjachov. And it was considered like a high school. It was a mieszczańska szkola, they called it.
So elementary school for 5 years. What age did you start to go?
I started to go when I was 5 years in November, and 6 years in November, and I started in September school. I started before the first grade, because I was always running after my sister to school. Like your mother was running always school with the kids. She saw they going to school, she wanted to go to school.
And what kind of, the elementary school, what kind of school is it? So, just secular school?
What?
It was secular. They didn't teach you any Yiddishkeit there?
No, but I went, I had a private man. My father paid for a man who taught us to write Hebrew, Yiddish, and to read.